The trail is a metaphor for change. Although hiking, and specifically endurance hiking, is now a big part of my day-to-day, it's not just about exercise. It's about transformation. Each step is a movement towards clarity, purpose, and identity. But movement is one thing, sharing insights gained is another. As a U.S. Marine veteran, I created this space to help other veterans gain clarity, purpose, and identity. Let's walk this path together. This is Trail to Transformation.
Most people aren't broken, they're just dysregulated. Chronic stress, pain, anxiety, and burnout aren't mindset failures. They're nervous systems stuck in survival. I'm Leland Holgate, combat veteran and neuroscientist, and I created the Welcome Home method to help people rewire their nervous systems with breath. And to go deeper, visit thewillfulwarrior.com.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us again on Trail to Transformation. I'm in guest hosting while Keith is out on the trail. So if you haven't seen the episodes I did with Keith before he left, I want to take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Suzanne Jabour. I'm a grief educator, coach, author, coming to you from Vancouver, Canada. And we're going to today have episode 1 of 2 with Amy Blake. She is going to introduce herself because I will get her credentials all wrong. But today we're going to be talking about trauma, attachment, healing those wounds. And then in our part 2, we're actually going to be doing some of the modalities that Amy practices and that I've managed to be a participant in and beneficiary of so that you can practice them along with us. Amy, before we dive deep into our topic, can you introduce yourself?
I would be happy to. Thank you. So I am a social worker by education and training, and I have a private practice. I'm in Maine. I specialize, I think that's a good word for it, specialize. I go deep and wide in the areas of transforming trauma and helping people build healthy relationships. I also am a transformational coach and really work on helping people develop conscious leadership skills.
Yeah. So when I had this opportunity to guest host for Keith, I knew immediately I had to have you on because we've had so many conversations about trauma, how we can reprogram the brain, what we can do to do the healing piece. And that's a huge part of the mission of this show and, of course, of the Trail to Transformation Foundation, which is in its beginning phases as Keith is out on the trail, blazing the way for us to carry on forward. Can you talk a little bit about the trauma that you see in your practice, the way that shows up and how it impacts people?
I can, yeah. I mean, trauma, we think about that as the bad things that happen. I mean, people are pretty familiar with trauma and PTSD. It's the physical assault, the sexual assault, the life-threatening neglect. Those are experiences of trauma that can come in accidents, they can come in war, they can come in domestic situations or stranger assault kinds of situations. And then the other piece that's really important is that there's attachment wounding. And the way that we think about that is that's the good stuff that didn't happen. So attachment, all of our attachment needs are childhood needs, the emotional needs that we have. And when those needs go unmet, it's kind of the more. The more those needs go unmet, the more we're going to have struggles. And those struggles include emotional dysregulation, dissociation as a defensive structure, as a defensive strategy that happens automatically. It's not like we choose it. And it also makes healing from trauma harder. So the more attachment wounding we have, the harder healing from an adult onset trauma is going to be for us.
That makes total sense to me, because if we already have those attachment wounds, so that our nervous system is already a bit dysregulated, and then you add those sort of big T adult traumas on top of that, it just feels like the overwhelmed is getting more overwhelmed. Does that make sense from sort of a lay perspective? Does that
Yeah, it
track with
does.
what you know?
It does track with what I know, and I can certainly speak to this not as a neuroscientist, so I'm not going to talk about areas of the brain in any kind of depth at all. But one of the things that happens, one of the ways that we learn how to self regulate, we don't come out of the womb knowing how to self regulate. Kids don't know how to self regulate. They need parents or adults, safe people who basically help them regulate at every time there's a rupture, every time there's an upset. And in that, getting that need met of being met, being held, being soothed as a child, it's growing a piece of neural architecture in the brain that basically connects the amygdala, the limbic system of the brain, to the prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobe area. That is really important because when we're just limbic in the amygdala, things feel like they're happening now, even though they happened in the past. So it's a trigger. The trigger feels like it's happening now. And when we don't have a lot of communication going up into the thinking part of the brain, then it really feels like it's just happening now. And so it's that kind of highway or escalator, as I like to call it, is the thing where it's like, whoa, that was just, I thought I heard my mom's voice, or that was just like my dad. But then there's the brain comes online and it's like, nope, that's coming out of the past. I'm actually safe here. This is just my partner who loves me. We're just having a little tiff here, just having a little argument. So there's that ability to kind of like come in with some thought process is really helpful. And that doesn't get developed unless there's a lot of co-regulation, help with soothing that happens all along the way in childhood.
So this show obviously is for adults. I'm sure many of us are sort of recognizing ourselves as folks who maybe have some of that attachment wounding. I know for me, I had really great parents, and they still were human, and so they weren't perfect. And there were, times when my needs weren't met, very minimal compared to so many people that I know who, when they tell me their childhood stories, you can see this sort of lack of ability to co-regulate. Like, nobody helps their nervous system learn how to stay calm and out of fight, flight, freeze. What do we do now? So if we're listening to this explanation and thinking, oh yeah, but wait a minute, I have that happen, and I don't feel like I'm someone who's never really identified as having trauma, except the more that I learn about it, I understand that we sort of all have trauma to a degree. And the more that we can take responsibility for that as adults and be doing whatever we can to sort of rewire those systems and reteach our body how to stay regulated and how to stay in that, restorative calm space instead of the activated fight, flight, freeze, fawn, forget, whatever, all the F's. I'm curious, and this is part of what we're going to do next week, is really get into, what practices can we do? What can we be thinking about, and how can we be approaching our relationships now if we're realizing that we have some of that attachment wounding?
Yeah. Love to talk about that. So there's a lot of different strategies. There's working with your breath. There's meditation. Those are all things that can rewire the brain. There's therapeutic approaches that really help restore a disrupted attachment. And that is like building a foundation that was never there in the first place. Approaches that I'm very familiar with and love are, one is called the developmental needs meeting strategy. It's really about meeting those needs now as an adult, because the brain has the ability to record if we have an emotional situation, if we have emotional connection, there's a recording that can happen in the brain as if our needs were met, and then we get to move forward as if our needs were met. So it's magic, actually. The brain is really, really brilliant, and this is an enormous capacity that we have. There's another strategy I really love that helps with both trauma and attachment wounding, and it's called deep brain reorienting. That approach works at the level of the brain stem, and it works with the shock that comes in before the trauma even registers, or before the disrupted attachment even registers. So those are some therapeutic approaches. I mean, I just want to say that attachment wounding, it's not a mental health issue. It's a human condition. Like, there is no child. If you have children, you know, they're little need machines, and no
Yeah.
child goes through childhood without getting some attachment wounds, some attachment wounding, some attachment needs not met. So it's in there for most of us in some way, shape, or form. And it's really what gets imprinted. It isn't always even what happened. So because kids have a self-centered focus, the meaning that kids give to an event, how it records in their brain, how it registers, can be deeply wounding when there was no intention from the adult's perspective. So that's one of the things that's great about these approaches, is that it can really deeply heal places. From a trauma perspective, I just want to talk about all of the trauma modalities that have been created are amazing. There's the classic EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Another modality that was really researched a lot in the VA is called accelerated resolution therapy. And that has a lot of alternating bilateral stimulation. It takes a different approach than EMDR in terms of working with the body and the emotions, as opposed to what's going on in the body and negative cognitions. What else? There's the flash technique, if people haven't heard of that. It was originally developed to help people be ready for EMDR, to kind of prepare for it, but then it's been researched to be a standalone technique, to be very helpful. It's actually quite quick. So there's a lot of approaches, and I think what's really important for people to understand is that when you have trauma, you're not broken. Your brain is doing exactly what it needs to do when you've been in an overwhelmed situation, but there are things that get stuck. And you can get help with getting through the stuckness. And it does require help because we're working with some unconscious aspects of the brain, and it's always helpful to have a guide on the side from the outside to be able to really help us lead it through. You know, the meditation, the breath work, all of those things can be helpful, but they take a lot longer. It just really does take a lot longer. But they're very great skills to have, and we should all be able to, in the moment, regulate, because the world's a crazy, dangerous place, and there's a lot that happens, and we can get triggered, we can get overwhelmed watching the news, you know, just knowing what's going on in the world can be tough. And so being able to right our ship, you know, get our regulation in place is an important skill to have. When it comes to the deeper patterns, that's where the therapeutic techniques can really come in helpful, because we can really restore or establish more solid ground that didn't exist before.
Yeah. I love that sense of it being like it's a twofold approach, right? Yes, we can use breath work, we can use meditation, we can use what this program is so much about, is that healing quality of nature. Like, there's so many things that really help our systems to re-regulate. And when we have that, more than sort of the human condition trauma, right, from those attachment wounds, from just having human parents, we really do need that, skilled therapeutic support to really help the brain to rewire itself. I'm so, grateful and excited to live in a time when we're really finally starting to actually understand the potential for brain healing, like for healing those parts of the brain that are holding that stuckness or holding that memory as a trauma. And we can fix that now. Like, it is, like you said, it's kind of like magic. And I, we did a session together with one of the modalities you use, and it really did feel like magic. It was like that part of my brain that had been stuck got unstuck. And yes, I still had to continue to do breath work and meditation and all the things that I do to support my system to just function. But that piece needed that intervention, because that was not something I could heal on my own without, as you say, a skilled guide leading the way and walking beside you that can do some of those modalities with you.
Yeah, and I would say as a skilled practitioner, somebody who does a lot of deep training, I also like to experience everything that I'm doing so I can learn it from the inside out as well as from the top down, the bottom up, so to speak. And I have to tell you, the freedom that comes with not being reactive or so reactive. It's not like I'm not reactive. I certainly still have my reactivities, but the decrease in that, to feel a greater sense of comfort in my body just moving around life, has been an enormous gift. It's been a life-giving gift, and I want everybody to have that.
Yeah. I think especially now when the world feels so volatile. I mean, I'm in my late 50s. This is the most volatile time that I have lived through that I've been aware of. I can't speak to my, my young baby years, but it just feels like it's shifting so fast. There's so much what to me feels like evil going on. There's wars, multiple wars. There's, just so much going on. I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but that's all impacting our nervous systems.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And, someone posted a really powerful video. It was on their Facebook story, and it had, someone saying, you don't seem like yourself. What's up? And they were like, my mind. And then it did this fast flash of, all the things that are happening on the globe right now, from the environment to the wars to the famines to the, all the things, the economy, everything that feels like it's in upheaval. How does that impact us and our level of sort of small t trauma? Like, it's not the sort of abuses that you're talking about that happened to us personally, but I feel like we're all kind of in this mode where we're being traumatized almost sort of all the time. Like, our systems don't know how to respond. Can you talk about that a little bit in this moment in time, what's going on for us?
Yeah. Well, we can only adjust so much so quickly. That's like the world's changing faster than it's humanly possible to adjust to. And so that's one of the things that's happening. And then add on that the intentional. I mean, we literally had, can't remember the name of the person, but somebody in government in the United States say, we want to traumatize our federal workforce. This was way back last January. So when there's an intent on traumatizing the population, that's we're living it. We're really living it and experiencing it. And I think one of the things that happens is that our leaders really do activate our attachment wounds around how we were parented, and so it can feel for some people this can feel like home. Like Big Daddy, authoritarian, he's going to take care of us all. And for some people, it's the most traumatizing and disturbing thing. And so people have different responses to it, but people do have responses to it. And we do project onto our leaders, our political leaders, our personal psychology. And so we do have, we do have our own reactions, our own expectations, our own hopes and dreams are all pinned on people that are supposed to be in leadership positions.
Yeah. I don't know why I hadn't thought about that before. That sense of like, how does this person in leadership's behavior impact my sense of sort of what that it is almost a parental figure, right? They have a lot of power in our lives in many ways. Like, how does their behavior impact the attachment wounding that I'm carrying from my childhood? And that has just like blown my mind wide open as a way to understand how we're all viewing this so differently. Because for my system, where I had a very, if we're talking about father figures, because right now most of the leaders seem to be men, So my father figure in my childhood was very calm, very ethical, very centered, very caring, like all of those things. So when I see leaders who don't behave that way, it's confusing to me because I think, well, but why would you trust that person? That doesn't feel trustworthy. That feels dangerous. But if your father figure in your childhood was authoritarian and you got told what to do and you did it, and that's what felt safe, then you would have a completely different reaction to the same leader that I view as being sort of unsafe and scary. They might feel safe and reasonable and comfortable.
You got it. You got it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to sit with that for a while, but nobody wants to watch me sitting mulling about how that has just entirely rocked my world. But I think it's so interesting to understand that this attachment piece and its connection to trauma is shaping so much of how we see the world and how we see people based on that attachment pattern.
Yeah.
And what that attachment history was.
And I just want to jump in with one more thing for sure for the viewers who might be trying to navigate trauma work and maybe it hasn't worked for them or it's been too much. Sometimes if you start doing trauma processing and you throw up, for example, or you get really distressed by it, you can decompensate. That is a very clear signal that there's underlying attachment wounding that needs to be addressed first. And sometimes the attachment wounding needs to be healed, to be taken care of in order for a person to be able to tolerate trauma processing. So I think some people that jump into trauma processing, that's everything, everything's a trauma. So trauma processing must be the way to go. But some things are more like along the lines of attachment wounding. And I just want people to know that because that is a danger place for people. And then what can happen is it's that feeling of I'm a failure. I can't even do this therapy. And I just have to live with this trauma and what that all means for me. And it's not exactly true. There may be other pathways.
Yeah. And that's such an important understanding, especially with the mission of Trail to Transformation, which is around veteran suicide. I can so clearly see the path between, well, I'm trying everything and it's not getting better and I'm having these awful reactions to it. And what does that, then we're making that mean something about us, as opposed to understanding from our sort of more rational space, no, there must be a piece of the therapy that I'm missing. So I love that awareness. If you are addressing your trauma with a skilled, practitioner and it's nothing's shifting, then it's okay to say, is there something else we should be looking at? What about this attachment thing? What do you know about that? Right?
Exactly. And not every trauma therapist is really well versed or trained in the understanding of attachment wounding and the impact of that on a person's stability. It's all about stability. And so it has a lot, if we look at suicidality as I want to say a stability issue. Like there's something about a person's level of stability that suicide feels like a really good idea because that's what it does. It's like, oh, here's an idea. This will solve it. And it seems like the best idea in the moment. And I'm very, very convinced that there is a connection between levels of attachment wounding and when and why suicide feels like a good idea for people in a lot of situations. I'm not going to say this is me noodling, not Amy research. So it's just 38 years of clinical practice and some thoughts about that. But I think there's a connection.
Yeah, I love that. I think this attachment wounding piece is so critical for us all to be aware of, and just having that sense of how it's playing out in our life. If you want to hear more about that and come along with Amy and I as we actually practice some of the modalities that she was mentioning and some of the ways she works with her clients that we can do at home that will take a long time, so you want the therapeutic assistance as well, that's what we're going to do in our next episode. I hope you'll join us then. And until then, we'll see you on the trail.
Imagine a world where every veteran finds a reason to keep going. That's the vision behind the Trail to Transformation Foundation. Help us make it real. Donate through the GoFundMe link, and as always,